I had been driving for hours that night, alone on a dark highway. My eyes were getting heavy, and the dull ache in my back had me shifting uncomfortably in my seat. I was heading nowhere in particular, just trying to escape the weight of life for a while. Things had been tough. I lost my job, my girlfriend left, and I felt like I was falling into a hole that I couldn't climb out of. I needed something to take my mind off everything, and this aimless drive seemed like the only thing that made sense at the time. It was late, probably after midnight, and the only lights I saw were the occasional headlights of passing cars and the glowing signs of run-down motels and gas stations. I wasn't even hungry, but when I saw the flickering neon sign for a diner up ahead, I decided to pull over. Maybe a cup of coffee or a snack would give me a reason to take a break. The diner was one of those old roadside places you'd expect to see in a movie, small, a little dingy, with a few cars parked out front. The open 24 hours sign buzzed faintly in the night, and the windows were slightly fogged up from the cold outside. There weren't many people inside, just a couple of truckers and what looked like an older man sitting alone at the counter. I parked my car and stepped out, the cold air biting at my skin as I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The diner's door jingled as I opened it, and I stepped inside, the warmth and smell of coffee hitting me immediately. It wasn't exactly cozy, but it was better than sitting in my car all night. I slid into a booth near the back and picked up a sticky menu from the table. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, came over, pouring me a cup of coffee before I even had a chance to ask. I ordered a grilled cheese and fries, even though I wasn't really hungry. I just needed something to do. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed the man sitting alone at the counter. He had his back to me, and I couldn't see his face, but there was something unsettling about him. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on the counter in front of him. I tried not to stare, but there was something about him that made it hard to look away. I shook off the feeling and focused on my coffee. Maybe it was just the late hour messing with my head. A few minutes passed and the waitress came back with my food, placing the plate in front of me without a word. I picked at the fries, not really eating, just mindlessly going through the motions. That's when it happened. The man from the counter got up. I could hear the soft shuffle of his footsteps as he walked across the diner. I didn't think much of it, assuming he was just heading for the door. But then, without warning, he slid into the booth across from me. I froze. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there staring at me with a slight smile on his face. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with deep lines etched into his face. His eyes were dark, too dark, and his smile, it wasn't friendly. It was too wide, too forced, like he was trying too hard to seem approachable. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, though it was clear he wasn't really asking. He was already there. I didn't know what to say. My first instinct was to tell him to leave, but there was something off about him, something that made me uneasy, like I shouldn't say the wrong thing. Sure, I muttered, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was starting to race. The man's smile widened, and he leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "You look like you could use some company," he said, his voice low and raspy. I forced a weak smile, hoping he'd get the hint that I wasn't in the mood for company, but he didn't seem to notice. Instead, he continued talking. "Rough night?" he asked, his eyes boring into mine. I nodded, not really wanting to get into it with a stranger. "Yeah, something like that." He chuckled softly, a sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Life can be tough, can it? 1 minute, everything's fine, and the next, well, you never know when things are going to take a turn." There was something about the way he said it that sent a chill down my spine. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside I was starting to panic. Who was this guy, and why was he sitting here, talking to me like he knew something I didn't? I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, glancing around the diner to see if anyone else was paying attention, but the truckers at the counter were lost in their own world, and the waitress was nowhere to be seen. The man's smile never wavered. "I used to be like you, lost, down on my luck, wondering when things would start to get better. But you know what I realized? I didn't want to know. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to get up and leave, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place like something was holding me there, forcing me to listen. The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I realized that sometimes the only way to get through life is to smile. No matter what happens, no matter how bad things get, you just smile. My heart was pounding in my chest now and my palms were starting to sweat. There was something wrong with this man, something deeply, deeply wrong. He leaned back slightly, still smiling that unnerving, too wide smile. People always say you should die with a smile, right? Go out on a happy note. But what if? His eyes darkened and his smile twisted into something more sinister. What if you smiled because you knew something terrible was about to happen? I felt a lump form in my throat and my stomach turned. I wanted to leave, to run, but I couldn't move. It was like my body wasn't responding, like I was trapped in this nightmare with him. The man tilted his head slightly, his eyes locked onto mine. You never know what's coming next, do you? 1 minute, you're sitting in a diner, enjoying a late-night snack, and the next, he trailed off, his smile widening even more, stretching his lips into something that looked almost painful. His teeth were too white, too perfect, and his eyes were completely black now, like the darkness had swallowed them whole. I felt sick. I needed to get out of there. Without thinking, I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The man didn't move. He just sat there, smiling up at me, his black eyes gleaming in the dim light. I have to go, I stammered, backing away from the table. The man's smile never faltered. You're leaving? But we were just getting to the good part. My heart was racing, and I could barely breathe. I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a chair as I hurried toward the door. The air in the diner felt thick, like it was closing in around me, suffocating me. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking as I yanked the door open and stepped outside. The cold night air hit me like a punch to the gut, and I gasped, finally able to breathe again. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was still sitting there, smiling that terrifying smile. I just ran to my car, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind racing. I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, not caring that I was speeding. I just needed to get as far away from that diner as possible. As I drove, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the man standing in the parking lot, watching me with those black eyes. But there was nothing. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I can still see his smile in my mind, etched into my memory like a scar. It was a smile that didn't belong to a human, a smile that promised something far worse than death. I haven't been back to that diner since, and I never will. Because sometimes it's not about dying with a smile. It's about running before that smile gets you first.